Hello everyone, this is another special from Architects Forum event. Today's talk is with my guests Michiel Riedijk and Dr. Juliette Bekkering. First we will talk a little bit with Mr. Riedijk, ask him about some aspects of his architecture, his work, his thoughts, and maybe some advices for young architects. Mr. Riedijk, thank you for coming to Belgrade, thank you for coming to Forum, attending it and giving very, very nice lecture yesterday. And I appreciate your effort and your will to present your work and your thoughts and your architecture in a way that would be much more appealing to the audience than it usually is done. And I can only once again thank you for being here and having us and privilege and honor to attend to your lecture. For the beginning, maybe we can a little bit repeat ourselves from the first day, and I may ask you of your maybe not understanding, but okay, vision of architecture and how you want to express your thoughts and how you form them and give them shape and volume.
Thank you for your question, and again, thanks for having us here. Juliette and I, we were here in Beograd and we really enjoyed being with you. Regarding architecture, architecture is a very strange profession because you design something for somebody else, it will be built by somebody else, it will often, in 99% of the cases, it will be used by somebody else, often it will be financed by somebody else. So, whereas an artist makes something for him or herself out of his or her private passion and private interpretation of what the world is all about. Whereas an architect serves the interests of somebody else, and what the key question is, how do you interpret the desires and wishes of what has to be designed? So in general, we always claim that we design what the client wishes, but that is not necessarily what the client expects. Next to that, we are profoundly aware of the fact that whatever we do is for somebody else and should act in the future. So instead of understanding the future as an extrapolation of what we know now, we always think that whenever a building is ready, it might be now in 10 years from now, it should perform in accordance to the needs of the society at that particular moment. So we're always trying to envision what the future is all about and what the future might need from a building. What performance is necessary that the building is apt to act in the future.
Thank you for that. That was really specific answer and quite direct. Because on Serbian, for example, we use for architectural design, we use the word projektovanje. Projektovanje, it's like not projecting something, but in a way into the future. So you're trying to not expect, but to perceive and foresee what you said, the needs and potential needs and probable needs and all the conditions that might change, you take into account to deliver the best possible answer on that question. And in your work on your public buildings especially, I noticed a lot of research and different applications of materials. For example, on that building of Institute for Sound and Vision, of course the facade, you explained earlier that you invented the way how to make those glass panels. But what I wanted to ask you is that search for adequate items on a facade or in the interior, if it's needed, is that something that comes naturally in your design process, or you at the beginning have an idea, I would like to have that effect on a facade, or I would like to initiate those emotions or senses when the building is done. Of course, in the project, but then it translates to the outcome.
That depends. In the case of the Sound and Vision, which was a very large European competition we won, we had already in the beginning the idea that the facade should in a way work as a lantern depicting images and showing what the building is all about and what is contained in the archive. However, during the design process, we discovered that just having images on the facade was stupid in a way.
Too literal.
Too literal, literally too literal. And in a way also not necessarily conveying the complexity of what images are, or the complexity that is contained by images in modern society. As you all know, in modern society, images are everywhere,
anytime and every time,
and also rather difficult in some cases. You have images produced of things that did not happen. There are images produced of things you do not want to know, etc., etc., etc. So what we envisioned at that moment, that we should collaborate with an artist, as we did. Jaap Drupsteen really carried on the idea and produced a beautiful design. But intrinsically, the fact that the images are not necessarily legible in first instance, but only in second instance you see the original image in the undulation of the glass, is very important on a conceptual level, but also very important in the quality of the building. So the building would probably be awful if all these images were super literal, visible, printed on the glass.
Yeah, that smudge gives them the quality that can be compared to anything else.
Indeed, the smudge is key. Yeah.
And those, of course, the atmospheres were maybe partially in the center of that expectation while you were designing, I believe.
Yeah. So we did not know this image in advance, but we knew in advance that this was something we were searching for. The direction. And so we discovered that the literal image would not work or would not carry the message as such. So by collaborating with the glass industry, by collaborating with Jaap Drupsteen, we improved that, and we eventually made this statement about the temporal nature of audiovisual industry, that something like sound and vision only exists in time due to the projection of light all of a sudden that is very present in the building, although you can't pinpoint it, still it's very present.
Yes, and what is also very nice, in a way fascinating, is that building, for example, is quite iconic if you look at it as something that is there in space, but the interior is capable of hosting, as I saw, concerts and very different types of activities, and it's the same place, but it feels like every time like a different scenography of that event that there is taking place. So probably due to the materials, probably due to the facades and that smudge and the way the light occupies the space after hitting that facade. And was that in a way not the intention, but added value of the whole design idea in the beginning?
And that's also what I just said about the difference between what a client expects from you and the wishes and desire that the design should fulfill. Although they never explicitly asked for a building where all these activities could happen, they always had the wish that the building would be this kind of center of the audiovisual industry, and due to the events that can take place in the central hall, all of a sudden the building became the center of the audiovisual industry. So I think that is what architecture is all about, that it also provides space and gives liberty to the unexpected, or liberty to all kinds of activities that should happen there that were not necessarily foreseen. Because if a building only can do whatever you want to do, in a way the building is like a straitjacket. And we do think that the building should always open up to new possibilities. Like in the hall of a sports school, you can do a concert, you can have sports, you can have a boxing event, you can have a fashion event, but eventually you can also make your house out of it. But if you have a building which is so precisely limited to one particular functional condition, then in a way it doesn't perform on a good level, I would argue.
Yes, and I believe on the first day during the discussion, it was you who said that at the beginning the architecture was only a shelter. I believe it was you. Maybe
it was
I'm mistaken.
For sure,
yeah.
and in fact, it is key that it's always also perceived as a shelter.
As a shelter, and then starting from that point, the architecture developed into way more.
Yeah.
But at the end, we are coming to that notion of architecture as an envelope for various activities that could happen in whatever the typology that building is dedicated to. There always there should be always that surplus of maybe space or potential for other activities to happen. It leads to multifunction and other notions of architecture as such, especially in contemporary world.
But the notion of multifunctionality is a notion I do not necessarily like, because and that's why the example of sound and vision is an interesting one. We think that this unprogrammed space within our buildings should always have a very specific character in its materialization, in the application of materials, and by its very specific character, it also invites for special use. For instance, in the Institute of Sound and Vision, you have the canyon. They do all kinds of concerts within the canyon due to its special form. In Naturalis, you have the staircases going up like on the mountain of exhibition halls. Also, this staircase invites for special performances, invites for special use. So we always argue that we're not necessarily aiming for multifunctionality, but we're aiming for character. There's very specific architectural space which has such a strong composition in its section and its floor plan and its materialization that due to that people are in a way challenged to use it and invited to use it.
That's a really nice attitude from you as a designer. And I read, and of course when I did the research on you, I noticed that it didn't take you a lot of time after graduating to co-founding the office. And do you believe that you had enough experience and knowledge for that step in that time? And how you, looking back from this moment, what's your emotion, what's your impression of those first founding years of the practice? Because it was the beginning, you were on zero, and you had the ambition and desire to build something out of that. And what are your reflections right now on those first founding years until the studio became recognized and fought for its own space under the light.
We as a generation were very lucky because in the early 90s, the end of the 80s, early 90s, a system of European tenderings came into being. It was a very fragile system still at that moment, but it became clear that due to new regulation, you could not give an assignment directly to your friends. Yeah. That had to stop. So we were able to obtain very interesting commissions like fire stations and we did a small building for the Ministry of Roads and Waterworks, and we did a small print shop due to the fact that this new system of European selections came into being. And our whole generation benefited from that. So very young architects were given the possibility to acquire interesting work because they had a smarter, better proposal than
the others.
And that completely changed. And nowadays you have to file a portfolio of 1,000 pages, and they're searching for if they're searching for a blue building, they describe, yeah, the building has to be blue, and you have to do 5 blue buildings already, and you have to prove that you have done very
blue buildings
good
already.
blue buildings already, and you will only do blue buildings in the future. So that is completely different right away, and that is quite, I would say, hindering the development of young architects at this particular moment. So getting back to where we started, we were very young and very naive, and we were not necessarily apt or aware of what we are doing, which had a lot of advantages, because if we would have known what we would have encountered, maybe we were less enthusiastic and less daring as we were at that moment. And I think what is important is that we already, in the early days, established an office where we took the decision that the office should remain small as a design studio, and that we would always collaborate with experts, and that we would always work with experts from other engineering firms, experts from other architectural offices, artists, poets, fashion designers, in order to enlarge our knowledge, but also in order to enforce the qualities of our design. And that actually, that's also what we're still doing. With Juliette, we collaborate also with experts within the university. We collaborate with other architectural firms in order to always give the best answer. So establishing an office was let's say a clear step, but with that step always came the idea that you do not know everything. In essence, although that sounds maybe a little bit strange, in essence, we try to be a humble office, and we always try to acknowledge that we do not know everything, and that by having discussions, meeting people, challenging experts, we expand our knowledge, but we also expand the quality and the basis of the architectural answers we provide to our clients.
Thank you for that answer. And at the end, because we have to speak with Juliette also, you were engaged in studies as a lecturer on the university, and you worked with students. And from those interactions, those are exchanges also. The lecturer gives his knowledge, and in return he gains the opinions of his students that might widen his thoughts and opinions. And from that period, I know that you said that you finished with that. From that period, what conclusions you draw from that whole educational experience of exchanging ideas with younger, more naive, more experienced, and maybe the creativity is not the question, but those creative minds that are imagining maybe the possible things that they still didn't encounter in the real life of a practitioner, of architect. Well, what are your impressions and maybe conclusions from those exchanges of two very contrast loads of knowledge and experience and dreams and imagination on the other hand?
I think teaching is very important and also very good to teach, because in a way you're obliged to simply transfer your knowledge in a way that everybody understands it, and that helps you also to clarify where you are as a person in a debate. Because in order to transfer to students or to people you do not know how you operate as an architect and how you design as an architect, in order to explain that, you become aware of what you're doing. So teaching was always a very important step in order to understand where you are in the professional field. Next to that, it's always very interesting to meet the younger generation, because they do have a different take on society. Right? So there's generations who have been born with the computer, or we are teaching generations who thought that the smartphone was always there. And of course, it's a small detail, but in the way they perceive society, but also in the way they perceive history, for instance, or architectural history, they think that only the architectural history that occurs on their cell phone is the architectural history that matters. And that is, of course, without any value judgment, that is a complete different era than we grew up in. We had to go to the library and we had to search for the right books, but yes, you didn't know whether it was the right book.
Always ended the wrong.
You always ended up with the wrong book, and then you had to study the book, and maybe there was a black and white picture in the book of a building that seemed to be interesting, but you wouldn't know, because you had to search another book for the sections and the plans. So, and you should not take me wrong, this is not a kind of nostalgia to the pre-computer era, but it's a different take on what study is all about. If
it's instant, then you have to take an effort. If you have
everything instant, you do relate to it in a different manner to what knowledge is all about. And in particular, if we're at the advent of artificial intelligence, in particular, if you take that into account, let's say the whole notion of how knowledge develops and the whole notion of how you gather knowledge will change. And that is super interesting, but it's also a phenomenon we have to relate to.
Yes, and we don't know what to expect at all.
Definitely not.
Thank you for this brief conversation, and now I will ask Juliette to accompany me. We're continuing with Dr. Juliette Bekkering. She's a partner at Riedijk, and we will learn and find out something more about her career, about her interests and field of expertise. Juliette, thank you for coming, and of course,
thank you for inviting me.
It's a long time since we had our last female participant in the interview, so it was definitely the moment for you to come, of course, and after you, Anastasia will join us.
Wonderful.
First of all, thank you for coming to Belgrade and spending time with us. I hope you enjoyed it.
Very much.
And for the beginning, I would like to ask you, I noticed that while I was researching Michiel, I also found you, and the data that told me that you two founded the office back in the days. So you were like partners in crime, architecturally, of course.
Yeah.
And Maybe if you can tell me a little bit about that, and afterwards we will continue to the work at Riedijk and of course your area of expertise.
Okay, yeah. Well, to make it very short, because of course it's a very long story, but I graduated with Michiel. And we started office together. We collaborated for a while, and on a certain moment I founded my own office, and later with a partner, Monica Adams, we founded Bekkering Architects, and we worked on a lot of, in the beginning I always said that if there is a strange commission, they come to me. So we built booster pump stations and data centers in a time that it was not so
usual.
It was not so usual. So I had this opportunity to really make very sculptural buildings because the use was kind of hidden. You need no doors, no windows. So it were, we also designed a highway, but also schools and many public buildings. I must say that I was always very lucky in the kind of commissions I had where I really could test materiality, experiment, the expression of the shape, the sculpturality of buildings. But what really got my interest was also working with public buildings. And that actually I think that as an architect you are always working in the field, the Vitruvian, utilitas, venustas, what's the third? Utilitas, venustas, firmitas. You have to cut this.
Don't worry.
Firmitas. That's so you have utilitas, venustas, firmitas, the three aspects of architecture. And actually, in my work, I kind of translated that to sculpturality. So how does a building present itself in the urban context? What's the shape? What's the expression? Is it quiet or is it expressive? Is it inviting or is it modest? So you always, as an architect, have to think about that. And then utilitas, well, you can translate it also to scenography. So what's the scenography that you design? So what's the use? How do people move through the building? But I think that as an architect, you can also design the different ways of the use of a building. And that if you really think about different uses, you can accommodate that. So I think that a well-designed building invites lots of users so that it's not static, but that it's dynamic and it moves with the people. So, for example, a school, if you have a big hall in a school, it can be sometimes very quiet, but sometimes maybe it has to house a party and it has to house, I don't know, 700 students suddenly. So it has to be able to accommodate and be perfect. To have a perfect shape and have a perfect materiality and use for that. So I think that that's a very important way to think about your buildings, also how they can transform in the future, etc. And a third thing, of course, is materiality. So you have discussed it also before with Michiel, that in the work that I do now together with Riedijk, I think that materiality as a way of expression is very important. Can it be warm? Can it be welcoming? Can it be timeless? Can it be rich? Can it be inviting? You know, by working with patterns of wood, for example, that are like most perfect paintings almost. If you have a nice veneer, so how do you make those choices? But also how can you invent and work with new materialities? So that's actually the field that I'm working, that has my interest, really. I think that as an architect you can make a difference in that sense, that by creating buildings that are very inviting, that new contacts, that people meet each other, that you can create communities. For example, like we made quite a lot of schools, and I think that the school is one of the last really public buildings, you know, where everyone comes. If you design a school like, well, we have designed a school campus in Belgium, in Peer, and also with sport fields, with a park, etc. And that really has become a kind of heart of the community, not just for the children during the day, but also in the evening. There are more than 25 sporting communities who are training in the sport facilities. There are people walking their dog. There are people following cooking courses in the evening, or people following, music lessons in the school. So it's this kind of multifunctionality and bringing people together and creating a house, a welcoming house. I think it's super important, and that you can play a role in architecture.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you were asking what I'm doing. I'm on the moment. I'm a full professor. I'm leading the chair of architectural design and engineering in Technical University in Eindhoven in the Department of Architecture and Urbanism. And I have a lot of students, of course. But what really interests me is we are working on sustainability, circularity, and also in emerging technologies. And I really believe that what we are also exploring in the moment is, for example, working with 3D printing, computational design. What can you evoke? And I truly believe in also bio-based materials. So how can we, for example, 3D print in a circular way? You know, we know all that nowadays that concrete is not very sustainable because it needs a lot of water and you have to put a lot of energy in it. So, but how can we become smarter? And I think that now in architecture we are in a pivotal time in which we have the means of controlling much more the production. So we have the means that with one push on the button we can 3D print something which is so complex that maybe in the past it would have taken 10 years. Yeah, maybe it was impossible, but maybe also it would take 10 years to make that. So you have a whole new set of ornamentation, patterns, shapes that come at our disposal, but also the way you produce buildings. For example, you can, we have done an experiment with 3D concrete printing on circular molds, in which we have robotically shaped the molds in sand so they can be demolished afterwards. It's very sustainable, you can reuse them. And but then you can suddenly 3D print in any curvature you want, but the strange thing is actually when you work with this kind of techniques, we're also working on circularity, working with bio-based materials, etc. Also, that you notice that on the one hand we can do a lot. There's a lot of technique available, but on the other hand, the applications are still very restricted. And we were working, for example, to 3D print on these circular molds, different shapes, to print patterns as a kind of sun shading facade elements. And then, they were breaking, and then we had to spend hours to fit the robot so that it could shape the sand, and it was breaking and it was dripping down. So in a certain way you feel a bit like a child who is testing on the shore of the beach with the sand how you can shape it. So I think that there are a lot of still research has to be done, but I think that there are fantastic opportunities, and I think that it will also really change the way we design. And I think also that it makes that we as architects have to reformulate our ambitions and also our focus, that on the moment that anything is possible, what do you make? Yeah, on the moment that you can
when you can make anything, what
do you make? You know, that's it's a bit like a child in a toy store, you know, that you don't know what to choose anymore. So I think that in that sense, we should also be very, in that way, I think we really should cherish the essence of our profession, and that's to accommodate beauty and also togetherness, to shape community and to shape welcoming and valuable buildings.
Thank you for a wide, long, and excellent answer, because you covered all the things I wanted to ask you in like 3 or 4 separate questions. And as you work with the students, what would you not recommend, but what aspects or skills would you advise your students to develop, or those who are just at the beginning of the studies, on what areas to focus in their own development, just to be not better ready, but more adapted to the real life situations that they will come up to when they finish their studies?
Yeah, well, it's. I think curiosity is very important, and maybe it's also a very simple thing, but that you really go very deep.
Into research.
That you go very deep in the research, and I think that the thing what happens very often, I think that there is so much impressions and there are so much shapes, and with a computer you can make any rendering and so. But I think it's very important that everyone really for his or herself finds what he or she finds really important, and then really grasp the essence of it and develop also the skills. So I think that very often I'm saying to my students, for example, if they have references, that the reference has to be at least 30 years old. And
that's historical.
Yes, because I think it's very important to have a deeper knowledge of references, of buildings, of also philosophy, of art, etc., which is further than the last Art Daily, because the first moment that you ask, you get the last published projects from Art Daily, and then it's very much more interesting to see where it comes from and what the
context behind.
What the context behind. But I think also that the students have an enormous range of possibilities, because there is happening so much. If I see for myself that since 4 years I'm now working with Riedijk on super interesting projects. And if I see how fast the commissions change, so that what was sustainable 10 years ago is now
Today,
it's now standard, or not even, you know, it's old-fashioned.
Yeah.
And I think that this knowledge has to be, you have to catch up with that knowledge
Updated.
constantly. But I think that have built like things like building with nature, building with sustainable materials, finding out your materials, having knowledge of what is bio-based, how can you work with bio-based materials, and that's going to dramatically change, I think, also in the upcoming future. And also, for example, I see also the skills in computer change very fast. So what is AI bringing us? We do not know yet. It's out there.
We'll have to wait and adapt.
It's a challenge. But I think that for us also in our work, there's always a kind of invention that you make. And for example, we just won a competition for museum, the Jules Verne Museum, Cité des Imaginaires in Nantes. And I think that, if you very carefully look at all the assignments and the demands of your client, and if you make kind of intelligent, unexpected interpretation of this, then I think that that's something that's always uplifting and leading to something beautiful. So you should always strive for beauty. I think that that's very important.
That's a great message for the end of this conversation. Thank you very much for joining us and for having a brief talk now, but I hope that soon we'll meet again and continue where we left out.
Okay, I will be happy to join for a talk in the future.
Thank you very much.